everyone. I am so excited to have this opportunity to share this information with you. After doing the presentation on neuro development last week, I received so many incredibly kind comments and so many parents thanking me for having shared this information. I also received many requests on having access to the slides I presented and to seeing my son's video. So I decided to do a voiceover and share a little bit of what I shared that day. There is no way that I could duplicate it because I will not be having amazing, beautiful people in front of me. So how I actually got into neurodevelopment was because of my boys. I have two boys. Manny is my oldest and Adrian. Manny is 24 right now and Adrian is 22. When I had Manny, when he was a baby, I kept talking to my pediatrician and asking him, hey, I think there's something off with this kiddo. And my pediatrician assured me time and time again that there was nothing going on with this kiddo, that everything was fine, that boys spoke later than girls, that he was a boy, so he developed just a little bit slower, and everybody develops differently. And, you know, he was my first, so I was probably a little paranoid and neurotic, and honestly, I didn't think so, but that was his take. So needless to say, we had a second child, Adrian. So when Adrian was 2 months, Manny got the diagnosis of autism. And back then, it was not like it is today that I could go into the internet and figure out what autism was and what kind of things people were doing and suggesting and all that. So it was very frustrating when the person that evaluated him came out and said, hi, your child has autism. Take him home, love him. That's it. Like, what do I do with the child? There was no answers. There was no direction that was given to me. So needless to say, I went home and started figuring out on my own what to do. So I went to lots of meetings, lots of different things that came about in trying to do this for Manny. Adrian was basically in my arms, in a car seat, in the stroller, always on his back. Never actually got any time to really develop. So within months, Adrian started showing delays. And as soon as we started seeking help for him as well, as soon as they found out that we had a son that had autism, it was very quick. People were very quick to then give him those kinds of labels as well, which, you know, he did exhibit certain behaviors that were similar to Manny. So I could kind of see how he would be labeled, but it just didn't fit. And so in my search to figure this kid out, I came across neurodevelopment. And that completely has changed our life. And I have devoted my whole entire life after that to being able to understand more about the brain, more about behaviors, and more importantly, how to help more kids and families have answers to the same ones that I sought after. Because the biggest thing that I saw with Adrian was that he didn't fit the typical labels, because there were moments that it almost seemed like all the stars had aligned and he could speak clearly when he really wasn't even speaking. And he could do things perfectly. And then the next day he couldn't do a single thing. And that puzzled me tremendously. At the end of this video, I'm hoping that you're going to be able to look at some of the behaviors and have a second thought of where they might be coming from. Sometimes we just are very quick to label certain things and think that it's just the way the child is. It's a personality, but I'm going to challenge you today to have an open mind. So let's get started. We're going to be looking at two parts of the brain. One is called the pons, which is highlighted in blue. The other is called the midbrain. These two parts of the brain are to be developed before a child gets upright. And if they don't get developed, then we basically end up compensating and working harder. The pons develops between 0 and 5 months, and the primary movement is on the belly. I love that doctors are having more awareness of belly time, but in fact, it's not just having belly time. The child should be on their belly as a default position. And if that's not the case, then automatic functions are not going to develop. And these automatic functions only develop when the child, again, is on their belly, preferably on a slick surface. You can actually go down the list and read them yourself. What I want to talk about is sometimes effects that the inability to have the pons develop may cause. So those are the ones that we tend to really notice. So difficulty reading and writing. One of the reasons is because if I'm not able to have tracking, automatic, which if you saw the last slide, automatic tracking comes in with the development of the pons, then I end up compensating. My eyes are not able to smoothly go across the page and sometimes end up skipping words. When I get to the end of the line, I may even go to I think I'm going to the beginning of the next line, but in fact I might have even skipped a line, or sometimes even a paragraph, and I don't even know it, which then means that my brain is definitely going to miss out on information, which what is that going to do to comprehension? Constant anxiety, this is a huge one for our kids, because if we are in constant anxiety, that means that I'm in fight or flight all the time. And the fight or flight reflex is really only supposed to be activated, when we really are in a fight or flight. When we really are in a life and death situation, which most of us are not really there on a day-to-day basis. But if my pons is underdeveloped, I'm going to be triggered into fight or flight all the time. So my brain perceives almost everything to be threatening. This is an issue because when I ask my child to go brush their teeth, they might perceive that as being threatening. Not really. Is it threatening? But the brain perceives it as threatening, and I will go into a meltdown, inattentive, big time. I can't pay attention if my cortex is not on. Most of my awareness is in my pons. It's in my fight or flight because I'm threatened. So, of course, I'm going to be perceived as inattentive. I'm difficulty forming strong relationships. I think you can kind of guess why that would be. If I'm constantly reacting, if I go from 0 to 10 in 2 seconds, a lot of our friends will not want to be around us. We're unpredictable. Self-mutilation is actually in extreme cases. We usually see this with teenagers, kids that are older. They are daredevils. They perceive almost nothing as threatening. These kids will attempt incredible things because they don't perceive certain things as threatening. It's an interesting thing. They perceive some things really threatening, and then others not at all. So the next part of the brain is the midbrain. And the midbrain basically develops when we start to crawl. And we're supposed to actually be crawling for about 6 to 12 months. Automatics that come with the midbrain is balance. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. Detailed information about the environment. Has the ability to perceive tactile sensations. So imagine if you had gloves on and you had to go around your environment and feel things. If you had gloves on, would you be able to really feel what a smooth surface feels like? Would you be able to feel what a prickly surface or a rough surface? Not really. It's going to be distorted, which means that your brain is receiving distorted information. So the child is going to react according to the information that is being received. The distortion is going to make them act a certain way, which we're not going to understand because we're not receiving the same information. It develops a proprioception system, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. The proprioception system is the system that tells me where I am in space at all time. This system is key to be able to know where I am. Filtering and prioritizing incoming stimuli, huge. If I don't have a filter, then I can't prioritize what is important and what is not. Distinction to faces is also one of the things that come in at this time. And hearing and understanding meaningful sounds. Language is a huge part that gets impacted if I'm not able to hear sounds correctly. So really quickly, some of the possible midbrain effects if it's underdeveloped, it's inattentive. We kind of touched a little bit on that. And that one also has to do with if I don't have that filter, then any little thing is going to catch my attention. For example, if I hear somebody cough or if I hear somebody drop something, it's going to automatically make me turn. And then something might have caught my attention, and all of a sudden now I'm inattentive because something else caught my attention and I lost focus on what I'm really supposed to be paying attention to. Difficulty reading and writing. That one also has a big deal to do that we have auditory processing, auditory discrimination that comes in with the midbrain, visual imagery, visual closure, foreground, background. All of these functions are to be coming in automatically with the midbrain development. Tactile sensitivity. I have a huge amount of discomfort with tags. They bother me tremendously. Jeans are huge because the feel is very rough and I can't filter. I am going to try to avoid them, and I typically just like soft, loose clothing. Poor balance and coordination and clumsiness. It has to do with, if we remember back to the other slide, our balance and our proprioception get hugely developed at this point. So if I don't have good balance, then it's going to definitely affect how I move around my world. People think that I have a volatile temper, so I shift really quickly, and they don't understand why that is. Well, if I'm in constant fight or flight and I'm in constantly being bombarded with so much stimuli that I don't know what to do with, it's very frustrating. So sometimes people think I'm very manipulative or I'm very defiant. But if you had so much coming at you, it is very easily understood why a child would appear to be manipulative. They're just trying to survive. So if I ask a child that I want them to do a certain task, we innately know if we can do a task or not, or if we have the skills to attempt it. And if there's any doubt that I will not be able to be successful, then I'm going to try to take control. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to do it this way. What if we do it that way? So it appears that they're manipulating things, but in reality, they're just trying to figure out a way of how to be successful. Because if I do it the way that I'm being asked, then it may be that I fail, and I don't want to fail. So I'm going to stand up and appear to be defiant and manipulative. Dislikes physical contact. This is a big one because a child that has these two centers of the brain that are not developed, they also have reflexes that are also most likely not integrated. So light touch triggers this child to react. If a child is in line, that child will automatically turn around and punch someone. The other person had barely touched them. And the other person doesn't even understand why they got punched. And the child doesn't even understand why that child punched the other child that was behind him. And so, of course, the child that punched is going to get reprimanded. But it's a really sad case because that child really has no idea what really happened. This is a child, though, that also needs incredibly big bear hugs. Their system needs to be grounded, and so deep pressure calms the proprioceptive system, which allows me to feel grounded. They need that. It actually soothes the body tremendously. Poor bladder and bowel control. I saw this particular function come in it with my son in a very clear way, because when we started doing brain work, if he missed a day of brain work, that night he would have an accident. And then the more we kept doing brain work, it got to the point that if we could miss a day here and there and it would be no accident, but if we missed 2 days consecutive, oh, we'd have an accident. And it progressed until it got to the point that it didn't matter if we missed here or there, he wasn't having any more accidents because this function came in automatically. So the kiddo really does not know how these little accidents happen, because most of the time their cortex is so engaged in what they're doing that it doesn't have to be at night that they have the accident. It could be during school, because they're really paying attention to something else and they lose track and their body doesn't give them that message, hey, we need to go. And so then we don't have very good control over that. Perseverates is a huge one when I don't have my midbrain developed. Feels like I'm just a broken record. I just go over and over. I can't move on. Once I hear something, once I know something, then it's put in my brain that way and I cannot pass that. It's actually Manny. I told Manny that we're gonna go to the beach one Sunday, and that Sunday was cloudy and cold, and I'm like, hey, you know what? Let's go to the movies. It's gonna be a better day to go to the movies, not the beach. And he's like, but you said we're gonna go to the beach. I know. I kept trying to explain to him, yes, I said we're gonna go to the beach, but it's not a good beach day. Let's go to the movies. But you said we're gonna go to the beach. I thought you said we're gonna go to the beach. I want to go to the beach. And it just seems like no matter how you explain it, they just can't seem to move forward. So the more that we develop the midbrain, all of a sudden, I can roll with the punches. I can be more spontaneous. When this part of the brain is not developed, I need structure. I need to know where things are. And if they're not, if anything goes out of line, it can, and it does most of the time, send me off into a meltdown. Poor body temperature regulation. So you see some of these kiddos that wear shorts when it's really, really cold, or sweaters when it's hot in the summer. So let's talk about our senses. So we were taught in school that we have 5 senses, but in reality we have 7. We have our sight, our hearing, our touch, our taste, our smell, and nobody told us about the vestibular, our balance system. And nobody told us about the proprioceptive system. This is the one that we talked about. It's the body awareness in space. Where am I? So let's talk about the vestibular system. So the vestibular system is the boss of the brain. And everything gets processed through the vestibular first, and then gets dispersed to all our other senses. It has 3 semicircular canals, but it also has little tiny hair that are moving. They're supposed to be moving at all time. And if they're moving, then my brain is on. I can pay attention, and everything is being then directed to all my other senses, and so I'm able to know what's really going on in my world. If my vestibular is not strong, then these little tiny hairs start to move slower. And if they move slower, they're going to make my brain fall asleep. We have such an amazing system that we know innately, if we move, it's going to turn on the vestibular system. It's going to make these little hairs move again, which then turns on the brain. So if I feel my brain is turning off, then I'm going to rock. Oh, that is brilliant, because now I'm going to be able to pay attention. Unfortunately, it's going to bother everybody else, and they're going to tell me to stop rocking. Some of the other things I may do if I have a weak vestibular system is that I'm going to walk and run around, because that's going to also turn my vestibular system. And like we said before, the vestibular system is the boss. There's kids that are vestibular seeking, and those are, we said before, they're unable to sit still, unable to stand still. And then on the other end is a vestibular that is so weak that they don't want any movement. These are the kids that absolutely love to read and be left alone. They don't want anybody to really, they don't like roller coasters. They don't like any kind of movement. Oh, they get really sick when we go down windy roads in the car. So they're going to try to avoid these kinds of movements. We don't want a vestibular that is seeking movement all the time, and we don't want a vestibular that is avoiding movement all the time. We want it somewhere in between. So how many of us have seen this? Sit still and pay attention. So I want you to imagine if you were on a tightrope and I've asked you to then pay attention to my presentation, being on this tightrope, but without moving. Oh, and yeah, don't move and pay attention. Well, this is not going to happen because being on a tightrope is impossible to not move. And now you want me to pay attention? Oh no, because if I lose my balance, I'm going to fall. So that's not going to be possible. But what do we say? It's like, hey, you need to sit still and pay attention. We need to pick. When we have a vestibular and a proprioceptive system that is weak, and we have the early centers of the brain that are not fully developed, we need to pick. We either can ask the child to sit still, and we know for a fact that the brain is going to be turned off and they won't be able to pay attention. Or they pay attention to us, but we know for a fact that the child is going to need movement. So they're going to be rocking, they're going to be moving, they're going to be fidgety, but they're going to be paying attention. So you need to decide, what would you like? A child to pay attention or a child to sit still? They cannot do both. So some of the vestibular activities, spinning, you can actually just go down this list, stop it, and just kind of go about it. So let's talk about the proprioceptive system now. So this system tells me where I am in space in relationship to everything around me. And if I don't know where I'm at in space, then I'm going to find ways for my body, my brain to know where I am. You can go down the list and just kind of read this. It's kind of self-explanatory. I want to talk to you a little bit more about what a child is experiencing when they don't have a well-developed proprioception system and they're walking in the room. They're going to be touching everything, because if I touch everything as I'm going by, this is going to tell my brain, here I am. So it's going to bother everybody, because why do you need to touch everything? Can you just not touch things as you go by? But I want you to think about this. If you had a child that was blind and you're going to have them go into a classroom, would you say, please don't touch anything? Or would you just go, well, no, it's obvious that they need to touch to be able to get to know where they're at. It's exactly the same thing, except that they can't see. They just don't know where they're in space. This is a child, too, that when they're sitting at the table, they're going to be kicking something, or they're going to be pounding on something. They're going to be hitting their utensils. They're going to be constantly tapping on things, because that's going to give them the information that this is where I am in space. Brilliant compensation, but it sure bugs everybody else. There's two types of proprioceptive systems. We have the hyposensitivity and the hypersensitivity. The hyposensitivity kiddos, they're constantly getting bruises and they don't even know where they get them. They are always invading other people's space. And the hypersensitivity kiddos, they're always wanting to be left alone. They don't like crowds of people. So some of the things we can do to stimulate the proprioceptive is joint compressions, wheelbarrow walkings. Oh yes, this is wonderful. It's wonderful to be able to figure out, where is my body and how do I move it. It's brilliant. Squeezing sensory balls, wall push-ups, carrying things. This is great when you go grocery shopping. Get to your house and then have the child carry things into the house. You're going to be like a super amazing parent. You're actually having the child work on their proprioceptive system, and you're getting help taking in the groceries. Brilliant. Vacuuming and sweeping, leapfrog, tug of war, all of these things are wonderful. You guys can read through those. Oh my goodness, this is what I'm talking about. This is great for proprioceptive and vestibular. Potato sack races. This is my kind of activity. I know some of you guys don't like the muddiness of it, so you can do it cleanly. Okay, let's move on. So in our society, we have this beautiful idea of the pyramid of learning. Unfortunately, our society only looks at the academic learning being the pinnacle. They judge us as to how we are doing academically. And what about everything else that we need to have in place before we can actually do academic learning with ease? Oh, nobody cares about that. So the cool thing is, though, that if we focus on the sensory systems, those 2 rows at the very bottom, and because most of you guys that saw this presentation was for a Montessori school, the cool thing is that the Montessori curriculum is based on these 2 bottom parts of the pyramid. So I'm gonna have you guys think about something. There is something that is called mirroring neurons. Mirroring neurons is when you see something and your body has a reaction to it. So how many of you guys looked at this picture and just by seeing it, it makes your mouth water? It happens to me every single time I see this picture, and I've seen this slide a whole bunch of times. So what happens is that by seeing that, my body is reacting to what I'm seeing. It's mirroring what I'm seeing. So when I have a child in front of me and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this kiddo, he's never going to get this. What do you think my mirroring neurons are conveying to this child? Even if I say, you could do it, you so can do it, bud, that's not going to be what's going to be translated. So I want you to really be mindful of how you're feeling when you're in front of a child and what you're really saying, what you're really feeling and saying. So I want you to think about this, knowing mirroring neurons at this point. So if the nucleus of an atom were the size of a typical California orange, and we placed it in Los Angeles, where would the first electron orbital with its spinning electrons, if we have the map of the United States and we put our orange downtown LA, the first orbiting electron would be in Chicago. Chicago. Think about that. In between the nucleus and the orbital electron, there is space, making our structure 99.99999% space. That space has something, and it's energy. It's your thoughts. It's the vibration of your thoughts is what's in that 99.9% space. So if we think a child can do something, then that child is going to have those mirroring neurons rise to their highest potential. If we see a child and we're already being exhausted, like it's never going to happen, then this child is basically intaking that information and they're feeling your vibration. They're feeling your thoughts, which is, it's never going to happen. And that is really extremely critical to take into account. Our cells basically react to whatever our mind says. I love this quote by Bruce Lipton. It says, "Your child's genes reflect only their potential, not their destiny. It is up to you to provide the environment that allows them to develop in their highest potential." I actually printed this out and put it on my refrigerator because I want to be reminded every single day that when I go in front of a child or anybody else, that I want to provide the highest expectation of a child to be their best they can be. I sure hope I was able to share information with you that may make a difference in your life. I know for a fact, 100%, it completely changed my life. I'm going to share with you a very personal video. It's a sequence of my son's development with doing this work, doing brain work, and combining it with Brain Gym. No, we didn't talk very much about Brain Gym, but Brain Gym is a beautiful program that allows us to have tools to better help ourselves. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
What are you afraid of?
Dark.
The dark makes you frightened? What do you think is going to happen in the dark? Who's talking to you? Who's talking to you? Then show me.
Even with a tactile prompt, he still avoids making eye contact.
What do you think is going to happen in the dark? Who's talking to you?
Scared.
Are you afraid something's going to...
When your midbrain is underdeveloped, eyes are not able to converge, making eye contact painful.
Where am I? Where am I? I'm not over there. Where are you coming from? Come in the dark? You sleep with a little light on? Or is it all dark?
It's all dark. It's only all light.
Okay, you know what I want to do today? I want to see some brain change.
Notice how Adrian puts his feet on the table, his body slouches, and his tongue comes out of his mouth as soon as he's given directions on what he will do next. This is what happens when the cortex is overwhelmed. It's not hard to see how he was given many different labels. From an early brain development standpoint, the behaviors he's exhibiting would be considered typical of an infant.
Are you a brain gym teacher?
Hello, teacher. I have Paul and Sarah here. So ready? Let's black and white. The mean over. A mighty swimmer. A restless rover. He looks like a fish from head to tail. But he isn't a fish. He's a killer whale.
Did you notice his effortless eye contact?
I have another one. And I have two more for you. Let's grab the grail of the sea. I have the grail of the first.
Before brain work, messing up would have warranted a 2-hour tantrum. Notice how he continued after a simple prompt.
When she waits for a way, like she was disturbed. But she's not him. No, she's waiting here. When us for separate.
At this point, it seems like Adrian has lost eye contact, but in fact, he's drawing attention to how he's been standing steady on his balance board.
And look at my board. Steady. Yeah, that's the end of the story. Goodbye.
Adrian experienced amazing changes. He and his mom decided to do a fundraiser so teachers at his school could get trained and more kids would be helped.
Hi, My name is Neuro Development. I'm an Android program. It made me a champion. I want my class to be a champion too. Will you help me in my classroom, please?
The tie was his idea.
Here's Adrian's reaction to watching his transformation. He was only told he was going to see the beginning of his brain work journey.
You sleep with the little light on? Or is it all dark?
It's all dark because I'm here all right. I have another one. And I have two more for you. Classroom, please.
Hey, Ronnie. So what do you think? Keep it running right now. What did you think about that?
Amazing.
Do you remember anything like that when life was back then? Do you remember not being able to say what you were thinking? You remember that? But when you look at that, how did it seem did it seem like you or somebody else? Which one?
I was in it made me feel like I was someone else's body.
Yeah, that didn't even seem like you.
But now I feel like I'm back in my own body.
I started building my body a year ago. I knew it was something I couldn't finish in one day, but I stuck with it. I did a lot of research. I learned how to tie different knots, like the bowline and the wreath knot. It was a lot of hard work, but it was worth it. Hard work pays off.